Joanne. Yes. Wasn't it like Regine or Donna? CPT to a color person's time. And Scott ages. Scott Jr. It is totally good. And I like it. And on this MLK day,
Yeah, right.
you should
What
be.
better- Good morning. Thank you all so much. Good morning and welcome. Thank you all so much for your patience and your grace. We know that we're getting a bit of a late start this morning, and we had some glitches in sort of the run of our show, of our program this morning, but we are ready to go and excited to welcome you all. And so I want to start by saying good morning, and good morning. On behalf of the Lewis Katz School of Medicine, I would like to extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to students, colleagues, friends, and friends affiliated with the Lewis Katz School of Medicine at our North Philly campus, and those at our St. Luke's Regional Campus in Bethlehem, PA, who are joining us virtually this morning. Welcome students, colleagues affiliated with programs at our HSC campus and across Temple University at large. Welcome to those joining us from Temple University Hospital and Fox Chase. Good morning and welcome to our North Philly neighbors, community members, and friends joining us virtually and in person. My name is Melanie Cosby, and I serve as assistant professor within the Center for Urban Bioethics and Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the Office of Health Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Lewis Katz School of Medicine. We are incredibly grateful that you thought it worthwhile to spend some time with us today to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've had the privilege and pleasure of working at Temple for a long while, 20 years later this year. Yay, yay, yay. During that time, I've held a few different roles, but the one role that I am especially passionate about and energized by is the role that affords me the privilege of engaging with students, being curious with them, and facilitating their thoughtfulness about how we can do our part to make a more just society, eradicate or at least mitigate all forms of oppression with a specific focus on racial equity and justice. To that end, we have engaged in thoughtful discourse about our own racialized experiences and our own process of racial identity development. We've come to appreciate that although sometimes uncomfortable, looking inward to better understand ourselves and the impact that internalized messages about race, racism, and worthiness can have can be incredibly formative. We've come to better understand that our socialization experiences, beliefs, and values influence our interpersonal relationships, our professional interactions, including how we support, teach, care for, and work with others. What does this have to do with why we're here this morning? Well, it's because being Temple-made means wanting to know better, to do more, and then do it again. To be Temple-made means that in order to know where we need to go, we must first understand where we've been. Sadly, much of Dr. King's life and legacy has been a bit watered down and sanitized in a way that leaves us missing the mark on fully understanding the radical, revolutionary activists who led a nonviolent crusade against racist segregation policies and horrific brutality against Black people. In fact, Dr. King was a huge threat during his lifetime, and he was not highly regarded by mainstream America. Why is this noteworthy? Well, did you know that he was under FBI surveillance for 4.5 years until the time of his death? Did you know that he survived 2 assassination attempts? Did you know that his home that he shared with his wife and children was bombed? Did you know that he was jailed 29 times, mostly for minor offenses and traffic violations? Did you know that at the time of his death, he was just 39 years old? So why is it that we're here today? To commemorate the life and legacy of a revolutionary and activist, a Baptist preacher, a servant leader, on this Martin Luther King Day and National Day of Service. A day on, not off. A day, per Congressman John Lewis and Senator Harris Woodford, say to transform the holiday into a day of citizen action and service, a day for us to serve and to act. We will spend our time together reflecting on his life, learning more about present-day challenges, making connections between then and now, including how history repeats itself. We will consider how service, activism, and action show up today, with the hope that as each of us departs, we are ignited with a sense of hope, along with a renewed sense of urgency and recommitment to engage in service, activism, action for more than a day. Let's welcome Christine Chin, second-year medical student, to the stage, who will introduce Dr. Amy J. Goldberg.
Thank you, Dr. Cosby. I would now like to introduce Dr. Amy J. Goldberg, who will offer opening remarks. A nationally celebrated clinician scholar, educator, and violence prevention innovator, Dr. Goldberg has devoted more than 30 years to medical education, clinical practice, and community service at Temple and beyond. Dr. Goldberg came to Temple as a general surgery resident in 1987, joined the faculty in 1993, and has held a succession of leadership positions, including interim dean of the Lewis Katz School of Medicine, prior to being named dean in 2022 following a national search. A master trauma surgeon, Dr. Goldberg spent 13 years leading Temple's trauma program, coming face to face with Philadelphia's gun violence epidemic. Adamant to stem the tide, she created Cradle to Grave, Fighting Chance, and other community and patient-engaged violence prevention programs that have garnered the attention of media outlets such as the National Public Radio, ABC World News, CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Multiple awards have lauded Dr. Goldberg for her groundbreaking work, including the Philadelphia Award, recognizing extraordinary civic commitment and social responsibility. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Amy J. Goldberg.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. Just so great to see everybody here. And thank you, Dr. Cosby, for your opening remarks. Today is a special day as we gather to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This has always been a day when we pause to honor Dr. King's great legacy through learning, activism, and community service. This year is no different. Today and throughout the week, our students and faculty are getting involved in many ways. Some are collecting and delivering clothes and other essential items to individuals in need in our community. Others are organizing and taking part in events such as this, where we can gain valuable insight to become better providers and citizens. This morning's event here at the Temple Performing Arts Center holds significant importance for the Lewis Katz School of Medicine as we continue our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. With this in mind, even though today is an incredibly important day of remembrance, reflection, and action, we know that truly living the legacy of MLK is more than one day. As we reflect on the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his life, let us remember that his message of equality and justice is not confined to a single day. Our work in the community does not just happen today or this week. Throughout the year, every year, our students and faculty are in the community, providing services from tutoring our youngest community members to providing healthcare services to those most vulnerable. I am so proud of this work and each of you. Please keep note of Dr. King's words, and I quote, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" This call to action will guide our everyday interactions and decisions, creating a more inclusive and equitable society by coming together and engaging in conversations like the one we will have today. I want to thank the members of the Community Service Board of the Student Government Association for organizing this incredible event. Their efforts have not only brought us together today, but they have also reinforced the importance of our ongoing DEI work. Thank you for your passion and your commitment. I also thank each of you for being here today and joining me to welcome our esteemed guest, Solomon Jones. Nice to meet you. I see you down there. We are so excited to have Solomon with us today. He is temple made. Woo! His life's work has been instrumental in advocating for racial justice and equality. He is a renowned radio host, award-winning columnist, and author of 10 Lives, 10 Demands, Life and Death Stories, and a Black activist blueprint for racial justice. The discussion we will have today is an opportunity for us to delve deeper into the issues that persist in our society and explore ways to actively work toward positive change. Through these conversations, we can challenge our own perspectives, learn from one another, and ultimately make a difference in the world around us. Once again, I express my deepest gratitude to the Student Community Advisory Board, Dr. Melanie Cosby, happy anniversary, Melanie, by the way, Dr. Melanie Cosby, Assistant Professor in the Center of Urban Bioethics and Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the Office of Health Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and our entire incredible OHEDI team. And of course, to all of you for your involvement in this event and ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Your efforts do not go unnoticed, and they are genuinely valued. Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Brianna Spell, class of 2025 and member of the Student Community Service Board. Brianna.
I'm here to share with you a little bit about Naya Williams. Unfortunately, Naya was very excited to be with us today, but due to unforeseen circumstances, she's not able to be and share her spoken word with us, but we still want to share some of the amazing work that she's been doing. So Naya Williams is a multidisciplinary artist and third-year medical student at Lewis Katz School of Medicine, where she is a candidate for the MD program and graduate certificate in narrative medicine. Naya is an advocate for the liberation and healing of all oppressed people, and this passion is reflected in her many projects, service efforts, and literary works. Her poetry, essays, and other writings have been accepted and/or published by a number of organizations, including Poetry Magazine, Black Youth Project, and Healing Points. Currently, she is also a managing editor of the Katz Journal of Medicine. Naya is a 2016 graduate from the George Washington University and a 2020 graduate from the Harvard College, with a degree in sociology with high honors. Upon completion of her doctoral degree, Naya intends to match with a full-spectrum family medicine residency. Looking ahead, she hopes to inspire full-body wellness across the world, one word and one patient at a time. So now we'll have
It is my pleasure to now introduce you all to our keynote speaker, Mr. Solomon Jones, SN's best-selling author and award-winning journalist who has appeared nationally on CNN, Nightline, NPR, HLN, the BBC, and Al Jazeera. Mr. Jones is the host of Wake Up with Word, which airs weekday mornings on Word Radio. He is also Community Affairs Director for Radio 1 Philadelphia and hosts Your Voice, a weekly show on Classics 107.9 FM. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from Temple University and pens a column on race and social justice for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Mr. Jones is the author of 11 books, including his latest, 10 Lives, 10 Demands, Life and Death Stories and a Black Activist's Blueprint for Racial Justice. Mr. Jones, a licensed Baptist minister, is the founder and executive director of Man Up Philadelphia, a nonprofit that partners with the Philadelphia School District and criminal justice agencies to reach those most likely to be impacted by gun violence. Man Up Philadelphia pays stipends to participants, provides them with mentoring, and assists them in finding employment. Mr. Jones began his professional writing career in 1993 while living at the Ridge Avenue Shelter, and went on to serve on the boards of the Philadelphia Committee to End Homelessness and the Doe Fund, an organization that helps homeless men reclaim their lives. A married father of 3, Mr. Jones is a national voice on race and politics, a recipient of Temple University's Lou Klein Award, the Knight Foundation's Black Male Leadership Award, and Community College of Philadelphia's Distinguished Leadership Award. Mr. Jones lives in Philadelphia with his family. Please join me in welcoming our featured speaker, Mr. Solomon Jones, to the stage.
What we need is a movement. Nah, not some fake rock the vote where the folks still broke, but the stars sell more record when it's over. Nah, not some show to raise awareness about the unfairness of it all to make y'all feel better about the devastation. No, I'm talking about the kind of movement that shapes a nation. A movement with a destination. A movement whose preoccupation with the people makes it strong. A movement that's decades long. A movement using more than songs to right the wrongs. Now see, it's time to tell the truth about what we see. Oh, y'all don't want to do that? Okay, I'll start with me. Because I ain't did all I should to help the hood. Now, just the other day, I looked the other way when I heard this brother say, "Hey, mister, can you spare a quarter?" I walked away thinking, I can't feed no man. I got to feed my son and daughters. And quarters ain't the change we need anyway. No, right now, today, what we need is a movement led by a man named Reverend Dr, but I'd be shocked to find another king who'll bring it like the last one, because 40 years after they killed them, I don't see no kings leave the building unless they walk into they ride. But what about the folks outside? What they supposed to do? Wait for you? Nah. What we need is a movement. One to get the mothers off the corner and the fathers out of prison. One to teach young girls how to make better decisions. One to keep the coroner from making wide incisions in our boys. A movement that's more than noise. Because I don't need the rapping, man. The yapping got to stop. We don't need no seminars and workshops on the block. Can't be sitting waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it just might drop on us, and us, that's all we got. Man, we got to hit our knees to save this generation. Then we got to hit the streets before the devastation causes us to lose what little hope we had for making something out of nothing with the action that we're taking. Because what they need, no. What he need, no. And what we need is a movement. Movement. It's what we've experienced in the 3 years since I last spoke for Temple's medical school. Back then, we were on the invention of Satan himself, Zoom. We were in the midst of a pandemic that illustrated the health disparities that made black people 3 times as likely as our white counterparts to die from COVID. We were in the midst of a racial reckoning that was driven by the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. We were just days removed from a Capitol insurrection where supporters of a defeated president stormed the Capitol while carrying Confederate flags. We were in the midst of a gun violence crisis that is centered in the community that surrounds you right now, a community filled with the very people King sought to liberate. And so here we are at Temple University for a day of service for the medical school, And we are right here in a city that is changing. A city where the homicide numbers have decreased, where a new mayor has taken office, where a quarter of the people live in poverty. We're in a neighborhood where that poverty is centered. At a hospital where you serve those very people, you have the chance to bring about movement. But to do that, to make the kind of difference King made, well, you have to ask yourself some simple questions. What are you willing to change? What are you willing to challenge? But most of all, what are you willing to risk? Because you can decide in this moment if you truly want to change things in the communities outside the walls of Temple Medical School, or if you simply want to be comfortable sitting inside them. And that's going to begin with the people you deal with as you're learning how to be doctors. 28 years ago, nearly 28 years ago, I was one of the most challenging kind of patients that you would ever have. This is the stuff that doesn't say in my bio. I was in a Temple hospital because they took me from a crack house to the hospital and left me there. That's kind of what they do when you're on the street. Everybody kind of mind their business. I'm surprised they even took me to the hospital, but they did, and they left me, and they admitted me to that hospital. I was strung out on drugs and living on the streets around Broad and Erie. This was a different time for addiction. This was before mostly white heroin addicts started overdosing on fentanyl. It was before anyone was talking about harm reduction. It was before people started feeling like addicts needed to be saved by giving them a safe place to shoot drugs. Back then, addiction was seen as a black thing, and although it wasn't, people used drugs in relatively the same percentages across racial lines. But for someone like me who was addicted to crack, there wasn't a whole lot of sympathy. So when I contracted bacterial pneumonia and was taken to those hospitals while living on the street, nobody was rolling out the red carpet. But there are 3 doctors I remember who treated me after the social workers got me a state-issued medical card to pay for my care. 2 of them were young female doctors. They were still working, I believe, probably on their residency. And they were kind and compassionate, and they listened. And I remember one day they even bought me some cookies. 28 years later, I still remember that. But then there was another doctor. He was an older white male doctor. And I remember him coming in my room one day and saying to me, "Turn that television down, you're not on vacation." And I still remember that 28 years later. You know, somebody once said, people might not remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Given that he must have known that there was hardened fluid around my heart, it had to be in my chart. I believe they called it pericarditis. Given that he had to know that there was water around my lungs, given that he had to know that I was in much worse shape than I thought, I've often wondered over the years if the disdain he showed for me in that moment was driven by race, by class, or by his annoyance with my addiction and social status. By the feeling that I had no right to find some small measure of comfort in my situation. That I was unworthy of his sympathy or care. It's almost 28 years later, and I still remembered how he treated me, not as a patient, but as a problem. And if I had died in that hospital and doctors told me there was a 50-50 chance I could have, I wonder if he would have cared at all. I wonder if he would have been glad. You see, the racism King fought against doesn't just play out in a criminal justice system where black people are more likely to be arrested, and once arrested, more likely to be charged, and once charged, more likely to be convicted, and once convicted, more likely to face longer sentences. Racism just doesn't play out in Pennsylvania school funding that the courts have found to unfairly fund poor school districts where black children are more likely to be students. Racism doesn't just play out in the fact that black people are 3 times as likely to be shot and killed by police as their white counterparts. No, racism plays out in the healthcare system. Racism plays out right here. That's why it was important for CNN's Sarah Sidner to point out that when she learned of her cancer diagnosis, she also learned that black women are 41% more likely to die from the disease than white women. It's important to know that from the moment we're born, black people's life expectancy is 6 years less than our white counterparts. That black people have the highest rates of infant mortality and maternal mortality, that we are less likely to have adequate health insurance, that our communities have fewer primary care physicians, and that even when you correct for income and education level, we have worse health outcomes than our white counterparts. That's not lack of resources. That's racism. And it shows up when doctors are less patient in listening to us, more dismissive of our concerns, less caring about our outcomes, less aware of our humanity. And it shows up in the smallest interactions that stick with us for the rest of our lives. Interactions like the one I had with that doctor at Temple Hospital. So if you're one of those who believe you shouldn't be here today, just know that maybe you weren't supposed to hear about King at all. Maybe you were supposed to hear from a patient who saw how he was treated and never forgot the experience. Maybe you were supposed to hear that the health disparities that make outcomes so much worse for black people are not just about our personal choices. Maybe it's about doctors who don't care, who won't go the extra mile, who don't realize that when the Hippocratic Oath says first do no harm, that harm isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it damages trust, and sometimes that can cost a patient their lives. So if you want to fill backpacks or paint a building today, that's fine, do you. But if you want to change outcomes in a medical industry your patients don't trust, you have to ask yourself a simple question: what am I willing to risk? Because true movement happens in spaces that don't always feel good. True movement happens in spaces where no one is cheering you on. Ain't nobody gonna clap when you really are about making change. True movement happens in spaces where someone is going to be pushing back against you. True movement is uncomfortable because true movement comes at a cost. The question is, what are you willing to risk? King risked his very life time and time again. He was stabbed, beaten, locked up, threatened, spied on, lied on, and harassed for years before he was shot and killed. So what are you willing to risk? The people you see in those black and white pictures marching in Selma while police beat them with clubs were students around your age. Those people who were beaten at lunch counters were students around your age. Those people who were sprayed with fire hoses were students around your age. Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, who died in a place called Philadelphia, Mississippi, for registering people to vote, were just about your age. They risked something. The question is, will you? Because true movement will not make you popular. True movement will not be embraced by the power structure. There's not going to be any corporate sponsorship for true movement. Your parents might have to bail you out for true movement. You'll be ridiculed and worse for engaging in true movement, but in order to engage in service that truly moves the needle, you first have to ask yourself, what am I willing to risk? It's a question I had to ask myself in 2019 when I led Philadelphians to stand against racism in policing. A study called the Plainview Project had come out, and it revealed that 328 current and former Philadelphia police officers had put racist or bigoted posts on Facebook. Posts that talked about the very people they were supposed to be protecting and serving. They talked openly about shooting black folks. They called us thugs and animals. They laughed when blacks were abused. But they didn't stop with race. They attacked people based on their religion, saying things like death to Islam. They referred to Muslims as terrorists. They called for immigrants to be deported, but they saved a special brand of hate for protesters, calling for them to be run over with trucks for daring to say that Black Lives Matter. When the news of the Post came out, I was outraged because our tax dollars pay for these people to patrol our communities. They claim to do it with honor and integrity, and many do. But these posts, they clearly showed that too many of them were patrolling our communities with racism and hate, and that hate not only puts us in danger, it puts good cops in danger because it makes their jobs harder. It makes the community more suspicious. It destroys whatever relationships were forged over the years. It makes all of us unsafe. So I talked about it on every platform I have. I did commentaries on WR&B radio. I did shows on Classics 107.9. I wrote about it in the Inquirer and on WHYY. And I saw, if you saw me in the barbershop talking about it, I talked about it there too. Now I know y'all like, why you in the barbershop? My son's got hair, right? I used to take him. But it wasn't until I was on WURD railing against the racism of the police department that I was confronted with the truth of the moment and my place in it. A caller got on the line and said, I hear you talking about these racist Facebook posts by the police, but what are you going to do about it? In other words, he was asking me the very question I'm asking you: what are you willing to risk? And in the moment between the question and the answer, my mind was filled with all kinds of thoughts. I thought back to my time on another radio station called Praise 107.9. And when I was on Praise, it was a gospel station. They wanted me to do a talk show and play gospel music, and it was an interesting mix, right? So I'm doing this talk show, and I'm talking about these social issues, and in between we playing some Kirk Franklin and some other gospel. And it didn't work. But while I was there, I got to know a different audience. And I still remember talking about these issues, and this old church mother. The black folks here know what a church mother is. Church mother is an old lady. She's been in church since they put the first brick on the building, right? She's a lady that everyone respects and reveres, and she sits up front, and she got a little hat on and maybe a doily on her head, Church mother. She called up and she said, you keep talking about these issues. When you going to pray about them? I said, I pray before the show every day. She said, no, I want you to pray on the air. And I thought about it because the reason I wasn't doing that is because for me, prayer is very personal. It's not a show. It's not part of a radio show or some production. It's personal, right? It's not for somebody else's benefit. It's really communication between you and God. But she said, I want you to pray on the air. And so shortly after that, I began to pray on the air. And then a while later, this old church mother called back and she said, well, I hear you praying on the air. Well, when you going to come out in the street and pray? She was very demanding. I said, well, I don't know about that. She said, well, I want you to come out, call the people, call the city to prayer. And I thought about it, and it was a scary thing. Because what I wondered was, if I do that, will it only prove that nobody was listening? If I do that, will it only prove that I really don't have as much pull as she thought I did? If I do that, will I be the only one out there praying by myself? But I took the risk and I did it anyway. Now, I did hedge my bets a little bit because it was right when the Eagles was going to the Super Bowl. I said, okay, we're going to come out, we're going to pray for the Eagles. Right? Because we've suffered long enough. And so we went out and we went to City Hall, and I remember I was late. I'm usually late. It's one of the things I'm working on. But the people were already there. When I got there and I went through City Hall, there were hundreds of people already there. And I had told them, we're going to pray for the Eagles, but we're also going to pray about poverty. We're also going to pray about gun violence. We're also going to pray about education. We're also going to pray about our community. We're also going to pray about racism. And we did all of those things. And every news outlet in Philadelphia was there to see us pray. And so I knew that if I called the people out this time for what was happening on Facebook, that there was a chance that everyone was going to show up, but I didn't have the Eagles to lean on this time. All I had was the fight for justice. All I had was the fight for truth. All I had was the fight for what's right. And so in that moment between that question and the answer, I thought about all of those things, but I was willing to risk it because the community had called me to come out from behind the microphone. The community had already said to me, stand up and accept your calling. And when you do, we'll be with you. When you do, we'll walk beside you. When we do, we'll hold your hand. When we do, we'll help you organize. When you do, we'll make it work. Because my people pushed me to move beyond my comfort zone. Because my people pushed me to come out and said, we'll be there with you. Because my people said that their husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, come on, we've been called to the streets. I knew what to do when that brother asked me what I was going to do about it. So I held the phone for half a second as all of those thoughts went through my mind. And after that brother said, what are you going to do about it? I finally said the only thing I could. I said, when I call you to the street, make sure you show up. And the community did. We rallied at police headquarters and demanded meetings with the mayor and police commissioner. We got that meeting. We put together a coalition and demanded that racist cops be taken off the streets. 72 of them were put on desk duty. We demanded that firings take place. More than a dozen were fired or forced into retirement. That's the first time in history that happened all at one time. We demanded hearings at city council. We got those hearings and more. We could have been locked up, but we risked it. We could have been beat up, but we risked it. We could have been shot up, but we risked it. So my question to you now is, what are you willing to risk for movement? The movement needs some kings to step out front. The movement needs some queens to take the lead. The movement needs some kings to change the game, to stand in the gap. But what I'm telling you this morning is you're more powerful than you think. You're more important than you know. You can do more than you can imagine if you just be willing to take the risk. If we're truly here to celebrate who King was, we have to understand what King did. He was more than this two-dimensional black and white picture on the wall in your grandmom's house. My grandmother had a picture of King, Jesus, and JFK. Those are the three pictures on the wall. But he's more than that. He's not just some guy with a dream. No, the king they killed was a radical who had more nerve than the brothers in the dashikis, who had more rhymes than the best beat poets, who had more swag than the young bucks who bragged but never had the nerve to lead the corner. He sat in more jail cells than the wannabe thugs, spit more bars than the rappers who followed him, had enough power to walk in the White House and demand that a president take action. While other preachers were in the pulpit trying to decide what it was safe to do, King was in the streets taking action because it was right to do. While so-called activists were just active enough to stay out of the way, King was with the people doing all he could to make a way. They told him to wait for justice. They told him to wait for freedom. They told him to wait for equal rights. But he told them about the fierce urgency of now. They told him not to challenge the Vietnam War. He asked why black men should fight for others when they didn't have rights themselves. They told him not to speak for the working poor. He went to Memphis, stood with sanitation workers and said, I am a man. The king they killed wasn't no punk. And his protests worked because they were tied to tangible goals, executed strategically, and carried out with strong coalitions. The Montgomery bus boycott starved a bus company economically, and it worked. The Selma March embarrassed a country through a medium called television, and it worked. The March on Washington was a marvel of organizing that was tied to a demand for legislation, and it worked. But in order to do all of that, King was willing to risk everything. If you want to do some of that, you got to be willing to risk something. When police shootings or modern-day lynching shared on cell phone video, what are you willing to risk? When schools have more asbestos than counselors, what are you willing to risk? When the black unemployment rate is still twice that of white folks, what are you willing to risk? When our brothers begin to see prison as a rite of passage, what are you willing to risk? And we can't afford to wait. Why? Consider these words from King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown has closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to form in her little, an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly at tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments, when you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. King risks everything because justice cannot wait. King risks everything because freedom cannot wait. King risks everything because equality cannot wait. King risks everything because he was left with no choice. But you can risk something because you have a choice. You can look at the service you'll do today as a prelude to something bigger. You can see the good you'll do today as the path to something better. You can see the folks you helped today as the first of many more. But if you truly want to do what King did, it's going to cost you something. And the question you have to ask yourself is this: what are you willing to risk? Because with great risk comes great reward. With great risk comes equality. With great risk comes justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for sharing your story and for your thoughtful and your thought-provoking words. We would now like to open the conversation to the audience for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to come up to one of the microphones, and we'll also have moderators coming around with mics as well.
Does anyone have any specific questions?
Hi. I don't know what your actual Reverend Jones is. That
You could just call me Solomon.
Solomon? Okay. Good to meet you, Solomon. Thank you again for your words. So, you mentioned in your talk about being struggling with addiction before anyone was talking about harm reduction.
Yes.
I would like to hear a little bit more on your thoughts about the development of that movement. Do you think that it's really more to do with like fentanyl addicts being more white, as you mentioned? And also, were there at the time, movements like that, or movements that were trying to help people who were struggling with addiction?
So, yes, I do think it's because people are white who are dying from fentanyl. Of course, those numbers are beginning to change as it becomes more of a problem. But in 2016, when it really, when I began to notice people beginning to talk about addiction in different ways, I called it the gentrification of addiction, right? So when it was us, you were a drug addict. Now you have substance use disorder. When it was us, you had jail. Now you have a push for safe injection sites. When it was us, you had people getting their houses, their cars, their property taken. Now you have people who have literally taken over Kensington, and the police just ride by and let them do it. And so I believe that race is at the center of that, and that's unfortunate. What I also believe, as somebody who now has 27, almost 28 years clean, what I also believe is that in order to help people to overcome addiction, they have to first understand that addiction is killing them, and they have to try to push to stop, right? And when you stop, you have to fill that void with something else. The other thing that I've learned in researching this, and I started writing about it 20-some years ago when I met a young kid named Sean who was begging downtown, and began to see all of these white kids who had been stuck here because the heroin in Philadelphia was the purest on the East Coast. What I've learned is that people do what you allow them to do in certain communities. And so I think that in order to truly help people, you have to get them to the point where they are ready to do something different, because you can't help anybody that doesn't want to be helped. That's number one. You can't. If you help them to continue to use the drugs, unfortunately, that's what they're going to continue to do until they come to the decision on their own to stop. And the unfortunate thing is that either way, it ends in jails, institution, and death. And so I think it's a complicated issue, but I do think that the approach to it now is absolutely driven by race. And we have to really confront that truth and that reality so that we can help those who are suffering with addiction.
Any other questions?
I really want to thank you for just an absolutely phenomenal presentation here today.
Thank you.
It's obviously heartfelt, and
Melanie put pressure on me. She was like, you better bring it. I was like, all right.
well, that would not be unexpected, because she's always excellent where she is, and she likes others to be in their space as well. My colleague and I were just struck by the dark clouds forming in her mental sky. And, for those of us who are parents, and especially parents of Black and brown kids, we're keenly aware of that. When we think of racism and all of its impacts in many different spaces in society. Kind of one of the questions that comes up is, where do you tackle? What do you tackle first? Is it everybody takes care of their own space? So physicians just work on healthcare? Do things get dilute if you spread out? Is there one space that you think, if you could change things, you might see some hope and some progress?
I think for all of us, it has to start at home. For all of us. I think for Black parents, we have to teach our kids about our history. And it's interesting because I remember one year we had come together for Thanksgiving dinner, and myself and my younger cousin, she's like 14 years younger than me, but we were talking about race and racism, and we were debating it. And my grandmother, who was around 90 at the time, said, I lived through it. I don't want to talk about it. Change the subject. And I understand that now because it's painful. Because the stuff that our forebears went through was stuff we can't even imagine. Right? You can't get on this subway car. You can't walk through the front door of this place. You can't sit at this counter. You can't live in this neighborhood. And if you do, there's going to be a violent response to that. We're going to kill you, and nobody is going to be held accountable. Like, that's the kind of stuff that our forebears experience, and that's why they don't want to talk about it. But we have to talk about it. Because if we don't understand history, we're doomed to repeat it. That's number one. But number two is history doesn't tell you what did happen. History tells you what's going to happen. Who would have thought that on January 6th, 3 years ago, you would have seen people storming the Capitol with Confederate flags, acting like animals, smearing the walls with feces, stealing people's laptops, threatening to hang the vice president? You wouldn't have thought that would have happened. But I believe that if we don't talk about history, it's doomed to be repeated. So that's number one. It has to start at home for us. But then it also has to start at home for everyone else. So racism is learned. It's learned. I remember when my son, he's 19 now, but he was a baby. We were at Pietro's downtown on Walnut Street. There were booths. And so in back of us was a white family. And so my son is a baby, and he's reaching over to play with this other baby who happened to be white. And he's reaching over to play with him because all they saw was that we're both babies. Let's play. Right? Because they had not learned racism. It's taught. And so the first theater where we have to fight this is at home. And then you operate out in widening circles from there, in your workplace, in your school environment, in your community, in your neighborhood, in your city, in your politics. But the first place to fight it, I believe, for all of us, is at home.
Okay. We have a question here.
So I think as medical students, many of us understand the space, the unique type of space that we take up in Philadelphia. And I also, see the many ways that space is taken up in Philadelphia. For example, the arena that's trying to be built in Chinatown, and the so-called revamping of Northern Liberties, and so to speak. What are your suggestions for young people like us to organize and really be present in a way that reflects not only our unique privilege of being medical students, but as we move into our careers, how do we take up space in a way that benefits the people around us, and specifically the community members, the people that have been living here?
I think that's an excellent question. I think that the first thing you have to do is treat your patients with dignity and respect. That's the first thing that you have to do. I think you have to hear them and hear their experiences and hear their concerns. And then, the same way you would organize any other kind of movement, I think you organize yourselves, which is to decide what your goals are. What are the three things that you want to do as a doctor beyond just practicing medicine? Because in practicing medicine, and I thought about this as I was putting together this presentation today, you're already taking a risk. You're risking that you're going to try to save someone's life and they're going to die right in front of you. You're risking that you're going to have to walk around with that and deal with that and learn from that and maybe apply what you learned to the next person so that it doesn't happen again. You're risking that maybe if you learn all of that stuff, it's still going to happen again. That you've done the best you could and that's just going to have to be enough and you have to move on emotionally and spiritually. You know, it's a hard road that you've chosen. But I think you have to decide what are the three things that you want. And then you have to find like-minded individuals who also want those things. You have to organize around those goals. That's what we did. When we had to organize around the policing thing, we had to decide what our goals were. And it's so funny because, you know, a lot of people want to put the cart before the horse. I'm protesting. Okay, you protesting. What do you want? I don't know, but Nah. No. You figure out what you want first. And then you organize around how you go about getting it. And maybe that's something that you can work with your patients on or the community that you're in. A perfect example is what Dr. Ayla Stanford did. Dr. Ayla Stanford started the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium because she saw in her patients a need. When COVID-19 first happened, it exposed a whole lot of inequities in the medical system. Because in order for you to get even tested, you had to have a primary care doctor. You had to have that doctor recommend you, and that doctor had to be within the system that you were going to get your test. Well, a lot of people in the hood don't have primary care doctors, so the doctors couldn't be in the network, and so they couldn't be in, or you had to come in a car. Well, people didn't have cars, right? And so figure out what your patient's needs are, figure out what your demands are around them, and organize with like-minded people in order to figure out what you are going to do about it. That's what I would suggest. Does that make sense?
Hi. I'm Nikki. I'm a second-year medical student.
Hi.
Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
I first want to respond to your comments about Kensington.
Yes.
I completely agree that the war on drugs is integrally a part of continuing modern-day slavery. And I agree entirely that nobody cared until white people were the ones predominantly dying. I completely agree with your statement there. But with all due respect, I don't want us to forget that all oppression is connected. I don't want us to forget that all our struggles should also be connected. The percentage of the population in Kensington that has experienced the most overdose deaths since fentanyl was introduced in 2017 was the Black African American population. So I don't want us to forget that there is, that our struggles are connected in that way. And similarly, when I was on my way here today, I was thinking about Palestine and Yemen and how the government has responded to that, and particularly how in the nation, medical associations have not responded and have not spoken up, and they've shown very clearly that they aren't willing to risk a whole lot for their fellow humans. And it's frustrating, and I just wonder what your take is, from where you were when you were here with us 3 years ago to now as you look into the future.
Well, I would say, first, that in 2016, when I first heard about the push for harm reduction, and that's 8 years ago now, 80% of those who were dying from opioid overdoses were white. That is why the push began. And, I don't want us to forget that, and I don't want us to get muddled in where the numbers have gone since then. I would also say that 75% of the overdoses that happen in Philadelphia happen in private homes, right? And so Addiction is a funny thing because a lot of it is centered on ritual. There's a certain place I want to do my drugs. There's certain people I want to do it with. There's certain people I don't want to do it with. I don't want to be bothered with you. And I'm not leaving to go someplace where you say it's safe because I don't want anybody to know that this is what I'm doing, right? And so I just think that when we look at social issues, we have to look beyond percentages, numbers, statistics, etc., in order to really get a holistic picture of what real solutions look like. Certainly all of our struggles are connected, but, I can't take this off, right? This is what I walk around with every day, and I like it. I kind of like it, you know what I mean? So I think we have to recognize that while all of our struggles are connected, there are some things that are unique about some of our struggles. I think there's a brother who is he's mixed. His name is Al Butler. He's a colleague of mine in radio, and because he's mixed, he looks Arab. And all of our struggles are connected, but every time he goes through the airport, he's randomly searched, right, by TSA. And so there are some things that are unique to our experiences that we have to first recognize before we go to everybody's connected and everybody needs to work together No, there are some things that are unique to each of us, I think, that we have to deal with. The Palestinian situation in Gaza, what I've learned from our listeners is that many of us as black people can see ourselves in the struggle of the Palestinians because they are a people who are dealing with oppression. And their response to oppression may not have been right, but it was a response to oppression that they felt that they needed to do. Unfortunately, is at the point now where both sides, in my view, are wrong. And so how do you fix that situation without a political solution, without a solution that goes beyond the bombs and the bullets and all of that? Because when you've killed 20,000 civilians, at some point, you have to figure out, okay, why are we doing this? There has to be a solution beyond war in that situation.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Chris, and I am a non-traditional student over here at Temple, seeking my undergrad in social work. And I appreciate that wonderful, powerful message, even though that word risk in and of itself is a very scary word.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of Isaiah, or what he said about Jesus in the, I believe, 51st chapter of Isaiah, where he said that, and he shall see of the travail of his soul, but he shall be satisfied. So, but in the meantime, how do you address or initiate such a movement where people will be thinking about risk, or do you try to evade that word, or should we go in knowing that it's going to be some risk factors? How do we try to engage or start or initiate a movement or a group like that?
I love it. I think back to, and you know, I'm too young to remember how the movement, the civil rights movement in the 1960s, how they trained people. But I have seen documentaries, right? And they told them right up front, look, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be spat upon. You're going to be punched. You're going to be kicked. You're going to be locked up. You're going to be abused, right? They let them know right up front. And I think that it's important for us to know up front what the risk is, because that's the only way that you get the real people who are going to stay. You know, there are always going to be people who are curious about movements. Let me see what they talk about down here. Let me go down here. You know, and they come because they're curious. And then you say, okay, now sign up. And they sign up. And you say, okay, now here's what you have to do in order to do the work. And then 1/10 of the people who showed up do the work. So you might as well just tell them up front that this is the risk that you are going to have to take in order to bring about movement and in order to bring about change. I truly believe that, you know, I don't have a whole lot of time to waste with those who are just curious. And that's fine. You can satisfy your curiosity, but we've got work to do. So after you finish being curious, get out the way so that we can do the work. And so I think it's important for people to understand up front what the risk is. There's somebody over there.
Hi, I'm a first-year medical student, and I just had a question, like, looking forward clinically, I think I'm looking at, like, media overload and how I feel like a lot of us have become desensitized to looking at a lot of, like, very scary things on, like, the news and things like that. And going forward and, like, working in a population in Philadelphia, how would you, like, give any advice or recommendations for us to make active efforts to try to not become so desensitized and seeing some scary and gruesome things in the clinical setting?
You know what? I think that's interesting. I think that you have to, for your own spirit, I know I do, in the work that I do, for my own spirit, I have to take a step back sometimes, right? I'm 56 years old, and I go home and play Madden. I admit that, all right? It's the only time when I can control whether or not the Eagles win. You know, but you have to find, you have to find some things that give your spirit a break. Because if you don't, your spirit will be broken. And so the other thing is finding people who love you and who you love and who make you feel good. You know, and social media, man, social media, I call it anti-social media. It's the place where people go to say the vilest things to each other, and they never have to see each other, right? So I've learned to block people immediately. As soon as you nasty and negative and hurtful and mean, I block, you know? So I think that is important. I think it's important to feed your spirit with things that nourish you and make you feel good. And take you away from the things that you're going to have to experience in your given profession.
Hi, Mr. Solomon. First of all, I want to thank you for always being unapologetic. Here I go. I want to thank you for always being intentional and unapologetic with every time you speak.
Thank you.
But what really resonated to me when you talked about the doctor who treated you bad 28 years ago.
Yes.
I've been sitting, suffering in silence for 3 years. I had a bad experience with Temple as well also. And I'm one of the community interviewers for Temple, Lewis Cass School of Medicine. And the one thing I always say to the students is that what's missing in the medical field is a warm smile, a kind word, and a helping hand. And number two, one of the questions I always ask them is, if you finish your residency and now you've been blessed to be a full-time doctor here at Temple, and you walk in and you actually witness one of your colleagues treating a patient unjustly, what would you do? And I think with you talking about your story 28 years ago, when you talk about the word risk when the doctor was so mean to you, I hope that all of the students here heard his testimony about when he said the 2 residents were nice to him, but the physician was the one that was mean. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it's right, first impressions count. With me, they didn't know what board I sat on or what did I do, but they treated me like I was somebody from a soup line. I was like I was a one and done. And when you use the word risk, I challenge all of the students here. When you see that a doctor is doing wrong, go speak to somebody. Don't sit, because you got to remember, you have a great chance to get other people in this community to start coming to Temple. But you have to tell Temple's story also. So help folks in the community. But thank you also for telling that story. That resonated with me, and I am going to write a letter just from what you said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And, you know, I think that we all have bad days. You know, we're all human beings. And I think sometimes we expect a lot from people based on the position that they're in. But I think we all have the right to expect just basic respect, right? Just basic humanity. You know, I think that we should expect that, not only from others, but for ourselves, right? We should check ourselves when we're getting ready to mistreat somebody, disrespect somebody, right? I think that it is critically important that we do that in whatever field that we're in, and especially in this field where you're dealing with people where many times they're at their lowest point. You know, and a kind word might do something to help them with their health outcomes. The way you treat them, the way that you interact with them, the way that you respect them might give them more of a willingness to live. What you're doing is critically important, and basic respect has to be at the center of it.
Okay, you have a question here?
Hi, sorry, in the corner behind your left. There we go. Hi. You've spoken really beautifully on the power of prayer and the role that faith has worked in your own journey and in your own activism right now. I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the role that religion and faith might play in our personal experiences in such a secularized field as medicine in an increasingly secularized country. I think especially in the spirit of Dr. King, if you could just speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, so it's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking about when my daughter Eve was born. She's 22. She was born at Chestnut Hill Hospital. And the doctor at the time was Jewish. And so my wife and I had gone through all of these classes and all this stuff. I don't even know why they asked the men to come. I guess just for moral support. We're not doing anything, you know. But, you know, we had gone to these classes and breathing exercises and all of this stuff. And so when she actually had Eve, her first child, it was real, right? And painful. And there were other women on the ward who were also giving birth. And this woman across the hall was just hollering and screaming. I mean, like screaming bloody murder. And so my wife's like, maybe the screaming thing. So my wife starts screaming. And the doctor was Jewish. And my wife starts screaming because she's, you know, just an incredible woman of faith. My wife starts screaming, "Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jesus!" And the Jewish doctor's like, "He will! He will!" You know, and it's funny because, you know, and she was just a marvelous doctor. But she understood that if my wife believes this, that if this is her faith, then as her doctor, she should support that belief, and in supporting her belief, that helps her, right? In this moment where she is at this point where it's just her and this pain and this baby that's coming out. And I think that it was an incredible testimony. And when I think back on that doctor and that moment, I think about how it's important for doctors to respect the faith of their patients and to allow their patients to embrace that faith, whether they believe it or not. Because that faith is many times what gets us through our most difficult times, our most challenging moments, our most acute pain. And so what I would say is, you know, whatever faith your patient is practicing, if that faith is helping that patient to get through, then respect it and support it and uplift it, because you know, that can help them to have better outcomes. That's what I saw in that moment with my wife.
So I have a question. I'm over here.
Where?
Right here. Keep turning. Right here.
Okay.
So when you think about our current healthcare system overall and the future clinicians that we have coming on board, what are some things you are hoping that they have? whether they have better practicing skills and how to be more compassionate? What are some things, knowing what you know now about the current healthcare system, that you hope our future clinicians will implement when they start practicing?
Oh, gosh. How long you got? No, I'm just kidding. What I hope is that you get to know the community where you practice. What are some of the challenges in that community? What are some of the needs of that community? What is unique about that community? What are some of the negatives in that community, right? And how can you begin to address it? I think that I do mentoring with kids. And the kids, they have a lot of names that can be challenging, right, to remember, because some of the names sound the same. And so one of the most important things that I can do for those kids is remember their name. Because what that shows is that I respect them enough to see them as a unique person. I respect them enough to see them as somebody who deserves to be addressed correctly. That I don't, people do this, racists do this. They'll purposely mispronounce people's names out of racism. Like, don't do that. You know what I mean? Because then even if you're not doing it because of that, that's the way people are going to take it, right? Learn about the individual and learn about the community enough so that you can have an intelligent conversation about the things that are going on with them that might be a result of the place that they live. I live in a place where there are gunshots all the time. I'm stressed out. I live in a place where I can't go to a market where they have healthy food. You know, my health is suffering because of that. You know, I'm from a family where, you know, we cook a lot of stuff in grease. You know, praise God for fried chicken. I love it. I do. And I don't care if y'all don't, you know, think it's, you know, whatever. But I do. But I know I can't eat it in the way that I might want to because it's not healthy, right? And so, you know, learn about people's community. Learn about their culture, and then learn about them as an individual. When you do that, it makes it easier to have whatever interaction with them you're going to need to have.
Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one more.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Found you.
Thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say, is that Amelia Price back there? Some of the kids in the post-bac program remember you from our community member interview that we had, and I just want to say thank you so much for that honest conversation. And one thing that you told our group was, don't ever let your white coat intimidate your patients. That really stuck with me, and I want us to all hear that today, especially. Yeah. But the question that I have is, I also majored in journalism as well. And, you know, obviously journalism back then and journalism now is totally different.
Yeah. Especially
with the way that facts can be omitted and things can be spun. And I feel like people's hatred can get validated every single day. So my question is, how do we change the minds of people who are so stuck in their ways, especially with family? I find myself on Thanksgiving every single time kind of keeping mum to myself and not saying anything because I've ruffled feathers in the past and I've taken that risk to say things, but I feel like I'm never respected and I don't want to lose the people I love. So how do we change? I believe in it. I believe we can change people's minds, but how do we do that? Where do we start?
People have to want to change their own minds. And Thanksgiving might not be the place to do it. You know what I mean? You want to enjoy your meal. You want them to enjoy theirs. You let it ride on Thanksgiving. You know, but, you know, I think that for me, I have to know that you want to change in order for me to even engage with you, right? Because if you don't want to change, if you're not truly curious about what other people think or feel or experiencing, you're not going to change anyway. It's just going to be an argument. You know, and I don't have time to argue with people. Like, I'm trying to fix some things. I'm trying to change some things. I'm trying to move some things forward. So I have to know that you genuinely want to at least listen and that you are open to change. And so I start there. I start with those who are open to change. And for those who don't, I pray for them, right? For those who don't, I'll see you when you experience something that opens your mind to something other than the mindset you're stuck in, all day long, and you know this, people are arguing on social media about stuff where they're not going to change their minds. I mean, they go for, I'm like, how do you have time? I got to go to work. What do you, but in terms of changing people's minds, people have to be open to change. If they're open to change, then engage them. If they're not, keep it pushing. Yep, you're welcome. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fortunately, Naya was able to join us, so we're going to have her come up and read her spoken word. So please join me in welcoming Naya to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. We can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Awesome, that's better. Thank you all so much for having me. It's good to be here, especially standing at this podium after a very eventful morning trying to get here. So as was probably mentioned earlier, my name is Naya Williams. I'm a third-year med student here, and I'm also a poet. I'm also a member of the Graduate Certificate Program for Narrative Medicine. So all of that is professional / academic talk to say that I believe that there is both power and healing in art in the same way that there's power and healing in our tools as future physicians. So I'm really excited to share with you all today. And before I get started, let me just get the elephant out of the room. I had a way better outfit. A way better outfit. I mean, the heels were amazing. But unfortunately, the road conditions did not permit me to make it back to my house safely to change into that outfit. So we'll have to save that for a later date and another occasion. But know that it was fabulous. So please bear with me, and I appreciate the grace. All right, so now that we've acknowledged the giant gray and black elephant in the room, how many of you all, by a show of hands, how many of you all own a telephone? Yep, just any telephone. Keep it up if you have a cell phone, okay? Keep it up if you love talking on the phone, love hearing other people's voices. Yeah, okay. You can put your hands down. For the people who said, I don't want to talk on the phone, put your hand back up for me. Anybody who's like, don't call me. Right? Okay, out of all of those people, right, how many of you all love the do not disturb button? Okay, I see a nice number of hands. Well, this piece that I'm going to start with is dedicated to you. It's called Do Not Disturb. Really clever. Yeah. There's something about hearing the phone ring that grates on every one of my nerves. Feels like Cruella de Vil raking her nails against my eardrums. Feels like that way too personal question someone asks with no discretion. There's something about hearing the phone ring that grates on every one of my nerves. But I thank God for hearing my desperate pleas for relief, hand-delivered and crafted into what we all know fondly, the Do Not Disturb button. There's no joy like what I feel when I see that little crescent moon shining above my screen, looking down with glory over the missed calls and voicemails. I now duck quickly and effortlessly. My family's still mad at me, said I'm irresponsible in my unavailability, but just like some of these Zoom calls can be emails, these voice calls can be text messages. There's no joy like what I feel when I see that little crescent moon shining above my screen, handing me the key to my escape. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that maybe it's not about how annoying the ringing is in my ear, or the buzzing is in my hand, or not knowing how my time could be wasted yet again. Maybe, subconsciously, I know some things can't be said via text. Some moments can't be pared down into pieces small enough for me to swallow so I can pretend they don't exist at all. Maybe I'm trying to outrun that call. You know that call. That deep ancestral call that comes around 1 a.m. when the tides are rough and life is rough and spirit is rough. Maybe I'm trying to outrun that call of finality, because I don't need to see the finale. I don't need to know what beloved token Black characters have been killed off this season just because their death brings in more ratings than their life. Maybe I'm trying to outrun that call from inside my DNA. The call born from 400 years of oppression and abuse being stitched into my great-grandmama and my grandmama and my mama's skin. The call still yelling from the house that I sleep in. The call in my head when I can't seem to think myself out of my own oppression with no tools, no support, no advantage. Maybe I'm trying to outrun that call of conviction. That mirror staring back in my face, spotlighting the crabs I wade through as I crawl through the eye of the gun barrel, casting down a shadow on my shadow self as I shadow the serpent slither of deception of my own kin. Maybe this has nothing to do with phones at all. Maybe I've created a world in my mind where I felt the need to write a poem about the Do Not Disturb button because it's easier to tussle and wrestle with metaphors than the real issue standing right in front of us. I can't continue to outrun the inevitability of my reality because the truth is, these calls really don't need a phone to disturb me. Thank you. So that was a piece that I wrote in college, and I think it's still particularly salient now, and it's very relevant to what our amazing speaker shared with us earlier, that we can't ignore what's happening in our world. We have to be the truth bearers. And as easy and as amazing as it is to put on the Do Not Disturb button to life's issues and to the inequalities that we're experiencing, it's all the more important for us to tap in, to be present, and to answer the call when it calls out to us. I am going to, for the sake of time, quickly get moving to the project that actually brought me to the stage. So I authored my second poetry collection, The Missing Entries, Words for Survival. It is a collection of words that already exist in the English language that I've given new meaning to. So I'm sure you're like, girl, did you try and build your own language? Trust me, it's not it's not that scary. It's very accessible and very digestible, and I'm proud to be able to share a few of those words with you today. The first word that I'm going to share with you is amend. Amend, verb, to disturb the status quo. Origin, the age of revolution, 1760 to present. Sample sentence. If our goal in life is not to amend the very soil of all the land we set foot on, what are we doing? The next piece that I'm going to share with you is currency. Currency, noun, an object to capture memories. Origin, the transatlantic slave trade. Sample sentence. My ancestors and I understand a different currency, but no identical prices. The next word that I want to share with you is historian, noun, an uncompromising spine. Origin, the autobiographies of my ancestors. Sample sentence. As the world rushes to fictionalize reality, my community will rest upon the strength of the historian. The next word that I'm going to share is jostle, verb, to intentionally sweeten. Origin, the shifting of tectonic plates. He jostled the love we share when he saw me without being asked to. And because I know there are a lot of science nerds in this room, I couldn't forget about us. I'm including myself, yes. The next word I'm going to share with you is virus. Virus, noun, of resistance, proudly. Origin, the loss of microorganisms during the rise of humanity. Our oppressor calls us wild, untamable savages, but I prefer to be considered a virus, parasitic even. And finally, I'd like to leave you with the word youth. Youth, noun, a means to make music. Origin, the crescendo and decrescendo of newly formed ocean waves. Sample sentence. The youth are the instruments that will craft the sound of the revolution. Thank you all so much for listening to my words. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to, the name of the book, again, is entitled The Missing Entries, Words for Survival. If you'd like to hear more about my ideas on how words and art and justice work are integral to our healing as a people, you can join me in May of this year at the City Winery. I will be giving a TEDx talk with Dilworth Park, so I hope to see some of you all there. Thank you so much.
So at this time, please allow me to share a little bit of history regarding the origin of Lift Every Voice and Sing, as offered by Emmett G. Price III, the inaugural Dean of Africana Studies at Berklee College of Music and Boston Conservatory at Berklee. Now known as the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing was penned in 1900 as a hymn of hope and grounded in the belief that resilient faith would sustain Black people against oppression. James Weldon Johnson, the songwriter, was born in Jacksonville in 1871 to a Haitian mother from the Bahamas and a father from Richmond. Like many other Black Americans at the time, James Weldon Johnson was influenced by the message of educator and orator and public intellectual Booker T. Washington. Born into slavery in 1856, Washington advocated for Black liberation through economic and educational achievement, serving for decades as the first leader of the Tuskegee, Normal, and Industrial Institute, now the Tuskegee University. Washington was a devout Christian who believed that God was powerful enough to liberate Black people from the evil of racism. Washington's focus on education and emphasis on hope and resilience inspired Johnson. After attending Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta University, Johnson returned home to serve as a principal of his middle school alma mater. For a celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 1900, the young educator penned "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which 500 middle schoolers sang in tribute to Booker T. Washington. Johnson's prose was set to music by his young brother, J. Rosamond Johnson, a New England Conservatory-trained composer. "Lift Every Voice and Sing" is a faith-oriented, inclusive, and pragmatic response to the societal ills Johnson saw around him. Faced with white supremacy, nationalism, and the proliferation of colonialism, he put to the words a theology sung out from the mouths of children, a calling to lift every voice and sing, and march on till victory is won. Beyond an anthem or a song of faith, this is a hymn of hope and invitation. It gives us hope for an inclusive, equitable, and just society, and an invitation to be part of the making of such. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Shango Jamal Lewis. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Lewis to the stage. We ask that if you're able to, please stand and read along as Mr. Lewis offers us his rendition of the Black National Anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing."
Good morning. As we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. King, let's commit our hearts and our hand to keeping the dream alive, and more importantly, for helping that dream become our reality. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod. silent, silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Oh, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee, shadowed beneath thy hand. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As we bring this enlightening gathering to a close, I extend sincere appreciation to our esteemed guests. Mr. Shango Jamal Lewis, your remarkable rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing truly resonated deeply, leaving an indelible mark on our minds and hearts. Naya, your written work added a profound layer to our discussions, emphasizing the power of storytelling and the importance of diverse voices. And to our keynote speaker, Mr. Solomon Jones, your impassioned words and insights have inspired us all. A special acknowledgement goes out to the students and faculty who have contributed significantly to this collective experience. Your presence and reflections enrich our discussions, creating a vibrant atmosphere of learning and growth. As we reflect on the wisdom shared by Mr. Jones, let's remember that our commitment to justice, equality, and community service is not confined to a singular moment, but woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Much like the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., their contributions urge us to take immediate action. Our dedication to this cause doesn't wait for future leadership role. It begins now. I encourage each of you to embrace the opportunity for activism and service in our community, whether through service learning, involvement with student organizations, or volunteering with local groups. Every small act contributes to a more just and equitable future. Though our time together is concluding, our collective work is just starting. Thank you all for your active participation. May the rest of your days be filled with fulfillment and purpose. Thank you. Now I would just like to go off script for a couple reminders. So for the M1 and M2 students in the room, just want to remind you that we do have a community service piece to this day. It's not going to be, as I said, confined to this one specific day. We would like you to complete at least 2 hours, which I think all of us are more than capable of completing that and more between now and the end of March. And there'll be more communication on how that will be kind of like disseminated and how we'll kind of be keeping track of this Now, this is not a requirement per se, but I think as Temple students, we do take service very serious, near and dear to our hearts. So I implore you all to engage in some sort of service in this time. Thank you.
Can we just give all of our participants today another warm round of applause? What a phenomenal program. What a phenomenal program. Certainly, we hope that there was something that you'll take away with you as you progress through the rest of your day. Again, more than a day for our Martin Luther King Day of Activism and Service. I want to just quickly acknowledge the help and all of the support that made this day happen. We've been planning for a long while. You all met your wonderful, wonderful colleagues, our community service board reps. And so please give them a round of applause. Please stand. They are, the Community Service Board is certainly larger than that, but those are our representatives who work tirelessly to make this program happen, and we are so appreciative of them. So thank you very much. I want to also give a shout out to our colleagues in the Office of Student Support and Undergraduate Medical Education, because this was a collective effort with all of our offices. And so certainly we want to acknowledge our colleagues in that regard. And so we have some over here in the house. Just look, just stand up just for a couple quick minutes. Please, please, please. And here too, so hand claps, thank you all, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have also an amazing marketing and communication team that made sure that the information was out there on social media, that the information was publicized in a way that you might get some excitement about participating, and that would not have happened if not for the tireless efforts of a wonderful team. And so I want to just give them a shout out as well. And so please, please, just for a minute, so thank you, don't be shy. Please just stand up. You know, these are our unsung heroes that often don't get the recognition publicly. And so we just want them to take a few minutes to give you your flowers and say thank you. Our colleagues at TPAC, the Performing Arts Center, are absolutely amazing. They make sure that the lighting is good, the staging is good, that we have sound, that everything works like clockwork. In fact, when Dr. Berkeley and I got here this morning, we were standing on the steps for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes in the cold. And so I said, oh, well, maybe I'll just email very quickly to let them know that we're here because the door on the steps where we were standing was locked. And they said, look, all you need to do is just pull the door open. The door is unlocked. We were standing at the wrong door. So they even help us to figure out where we should go. Want to also just give a shout out to others that have been unsung, Kendra and Ken Lee, just folks who have just helped to make this day a success. And certainly, if I neglected to name you, know that we are no less appreciative. Oh, actually, our community service, our community interviewers, right? Amazing. And listen, they don't just interview you all, they are engaged and really delighted to engage with you beyond the interview day. They were our Ghost Committee members as well. They helped us to connect with our phenomenal vocalist today. They helped just nuance the details in a way that we would do right by the program and the community, and we are forever grateful. Please stand, if you will. Thank you. So you see them in the building all of the time. They are really invested in you all and invested in us and really want to be a part of making what we do even better. And so thank you to everyone. And again, we hope that there was something that you took with you. Thank you for your grace for our little delayed start. And with that, I'll just say, have a good rest of your day. And remember, Martin Luther King Day of Activism and Service, more than a day. Thanks so much.